I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Well, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Welcome to day 10, verdict day in the Laurie VALLOW trial. We're going to have a look at what it looked like, sounded like, and Laurie's reaction to it as well. She was quite curt with the judge afterwards when he went through a couple of questions and where she had to make a couple of stipulations. So should we give that a listen? Let's just do that. And how's everyone
back
doing?
On the record, State of Arizona versus Laurie Dave, LCR 2021-001-704. The parties are present. I'm going to have my staff go ahead and line up the jury to wait in the hallway for a minute.
Do you guys agree that this verdict took longer than we thought it would? Probably they did end up watching that interview that she gave, and probably that's what the holdup was. But I guess we will probably find out what it was. Is there anyone here who feels that she should have been found innocent? That there was a mistake? I must say, if I was a lawyer, and I mean, I wouldn't have represented her, but because I'm more a prosecutor type legal person. But if I was a lawyer, I would have fielded a defense of basically pushing the whole narrative that the police found her innocent, that the police believed her, putting policemen on the stand and examining them on, did you accept my version, all that kind of thing. In other words, making the case that the police believed her in the beginning, and then after that, criticizing the police for their mistakes, and then after that also raising doubt about the trustworthiness of the police, because haven't they just changed their minds, right? Didn't they just, weren't they just sort of, someone twisted their arm and they've just changed their minds? And so on the one hand, supporting the police and then criticizing the police would confuse the jury. That alone might be enough to create some doubt. Okay, let's begin.
You agree that that's what that this is a dangerous offense?
Correct.
And you're further stipulating that as a result of your conduct, at least the victim or the victim's family suffered emotional or financial harm?
Absolutely.
And you're also further agreeing that the offense involved the presence of an accomplice?
Yes.
Is the state satisfied with the colloquy?
Yes, Your Honor, it appears it's knowing voluntary.
All right, the court does find that the stipulation to those three factors was knowingly, intelligently, voluntarily made. I will accept the defendant's stipulation. At this time, I'm going to bring in the jury and release them from the admonition. Before we do that, as my staff's lining up the jury, do you want to have a sentencing date within approximately 30 days, or do you want to wait until after the next trial to be sentenced on this matter?
What does the court prefer?
It doesn't matter to me. Maybe you want to talk to your attorneys or advisory counsel.
So Laurie's going to be heard again on
we don't have to do
attempted
it right now.
murder of Brandon Boudreaux.
In a few minutes.
Okay. Trying to find where the
1704. The parties are present. I'm going to have my staff go ahead and line up the jury to wait in the hallway for a minute. Remaining case, I've already set the dates and we have a status conference in mid-May on that. So unless there's anything else from the state's perspective,
I think it's here.
to move on to an aggravation phase immediately after the reading of that verdict. I've given the parties proposed aggravating circumstances, instructions, and proposed verdict form. The state and the defense both have a chance to review those.
Yes, Your Honor.
Are there any additions or corrections from the state?
No, Your Honor.
How about from the defense? The defense did email my staff requesting an additional
True verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your?
Okay, well, let's go to this feed. It's a little bit easier to navigate. Okay, Woodcock. Is Larry there, I wonder? Does Laurie look quite upbeat? Does the prosecutor look more upbeat? Hey, Karen. Laurie seems to be wearing like a bright pink or purple blouse under her jacket. Joe says, I haven't seen Larry the whole trial. Lindsay says, lock her up. Well, she's already locked up. She's already serving a sentence for the murders of her children, right?
the verdict.
Okay, so I think the jury are coming in at this point. You guys know that that Dita Deuce stands for God in Witches, the steel of Arizona.
Who's the foreperson?
Yes.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, we have.
I'm going to ask you to hand that to my courtroom assistant.
She seems to have a slight smile on her face.
I'll ask the clerk to read and record the verdict.
Optimistic to the end.
In the Superior Court of the State of Arizona in and for the County of Maricopa, State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty. Signed, foreperson. Is this your true verdict? So say you one and all.
Yes.
On the court's own motion, I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to poll the jury.
Juror number 1, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 2, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 6, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 7, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 8, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 15, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 16, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask the
So one thing that's for me quite interesting is Laurie doesn't really, no one seems to show obvious support to her. You don't have a legal counsel reaching over, rubbing her back. She's kind of alone in the same way that she couldn't field a defense. She didn't field a defense. She didn't even defend herself. She had no defense witnesses, not her parents, not anybody else. And it's kind of her against the world, right?
jury to retire to the jury room for just about 2 minutes. I need to discuss something with the parties before we determine whether you're done or not. So the admonition still applies. Please go to the jury room for a few minutes.
All right to the jury.
Okay, let's look at some of your comments. Natalie says 16. Yeah, one of the jurors had quite a soft response to that. Most of those responses were firm, loud, confident sounding, right? Which is kind of not surprising. Songbird says, wow, mostly male jurors. Wasn't it?
All right, please be seated. The jury is no longer present.
Interestingly, the Karen
I'll ask the
Reed
defendant,
trial
you
is kicking
indicated
off today
earlier
as well.
Perhaps a willingness to stipulate to aggravating factors. Is that something you want to do, or do we want to go through this aggravation phase?
I'm willing to stipulate to it, Your Honor. All that it is the dangerous phase. Is that correct? There's only one statute there's only one sentence.
Well, the jury would need to find, first of all, whether or not this is a dangerous offense first. Secondly, whether the offense caused physical.
It's quite weird how things are just kind of continuing. Laurie's just been convicted of another murder, and now it's sort of, because she's in the position that she's in, representing herself, she's just back to the role again of she's representing herself, almost like nothing has happened, right?
Emotional or financial harm to the victim, or if the victim died as a result of the conduct of the defendant caused emotional or financial harm to the victim's immediate family. And then thirdly, the offense involved the presence of an accomplice. If you're willing to stipulate to all three of those, we can do that. If not, we'll bring the jury back in.
I will stipulate to it, Your Honor.
All right. You understand that if you stipulate to this instead of a jury finding, well, let me back up. You understand the jury would have to find these aggravating factors beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
All right. And do you understand that if you stipulate to these factors instead of a jury doing it, I could also find additional aggravating factors at sentencing?
Sure.
Has anyone?
She's quite curt right now. It does make one wonder, is she just trying to like get out of there? Is it like, okay, we're done with this trial. I'll just say whatever I need because I want to get out of here. I'm embarrassed. You didn't support me, kind of thing. Otherwise, I see someone in chat says, her against the world, hardly. She deserves no support. I'm not saying I support her. I'm saying from her position, it must feel like she's alone against the world, and she should be. But I've seen so many defendants who have this. Think about O.J. Simpson. Think about Alex Murdaugh. No matter how despicable, their lawyers at least even reach over, try and offer them a word of encouragement. It's been a long time since I've seen a defendant this sort of isolated. Can you guys remember an instance where a defendant was this sort of isolated at verdict time?
Anyone forced you or threatened you in any way to get you to stipulate to these factors?
No.
Has anyone promised you anything to get you to stipulate to these factors?
No.
Have you had any drugs, alcohol, or medication in the last 24 hours?
No.
Do you agree that pursuant to the jury's verdict of guilt, that this would be a dangerous offense because a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument was used?
I'm stipulating to it.
You agree that that's that this is a dangerous offense?
Correct.
And you're further stipulating that as a result of your conduct, at least the victim or the victim's family suffered emotional or financial harm?
Absolutely.
And you're also further agreeing.
I must say, she doesn't come across as totally blasé. I mean, think about the nonchalance she showed after Charles was murdered. Isn't she pretty nonchalant now? Wouldn't you be quite emotional? You've just been found guilty of murder, whether you're guilty or not. Wouldn't you be a little bit emotional about it? While or even disappointed, the jury didn't believe me. I've been doing this for how many weeks, and it's all come to this.
Agreeing that the offense involved the presence of an accomplice.
Yes.
Is the state satisfied with the colloquy?
Yes, Your Honor, it appears it's knowing voluntary. Made.
All right, the court does find that the stipulation to those three factors was knowingly, intelligently, voluntarily made. I will accept the defendant's stipulation. At this time, I'm going to bring in the jury and release them from the admonition. Before we do that, well, as my staff's lining up the jury, do you want to have a sentencing date within approximately 30 days, or do you want to wait until after the next trial to be sentenced on this matter?
What does the court prefer?
It doesn't matter to me. Maybe you want to talk to your attorneys or advisory council about that. We don't have to do it right now. You can do it in a few minutes.
Yeah, so sentencing is still ahead of us. So is the trial, regarding attempted murder of Brandon Boudreau. So that is following this one. Kathleen says she doesn't have a lawyer to console her because she didn't want one. Yeah, but she does have legal assistance sitting right beside her. It's just interesting that it seems like she doesn't have a very good relationship with them, right?
Report until we resolve the next remaining case. I've already set the dates, and we have a status conference in mid-May on that. So unless there's anything else from the state's perspective?
No, Your Honor.
From anything else from your perspective?
Nope.
All right, we'll be at recess on this matter.
And that is it. So there's something I meant to mention during the closing arguments, and just it shouldn't be necessary for me to say this, but just in case some of you don't know me and you might misunderstand me, when I'm trying to understand the criminal mind, right? That's not that you are defending them or that you are sympathetic even. It's simply trying to figure out the thing that people so often talk about, which is, what is this person thinking, right? And so often we sort of dismiss that by saying they're crazy, they psychopaths, they're narcissists, or whatever. And it's a very convenient way, basically, to say, I don't know why this person acted the way they did. And it's also quite gratifying because you kind of go, because I don't understand this person, that means I'm good. Because this person's evil, if I understood what they did, then it means I'm evil. And so the fact that I don't means I'm so much better than what they are. And of course, a lot of people aren't criminals until the moment they commit a crime. And suddenly when they commit the crime, it was obvious all along that they were whatever, narcissists, psychopaths, whatever. Actually, no. A criminal is a person that's just like you and me until the moment they commit a crime. You might not think that's true. But anyway, this is the thing I wanted to emphasize. The motive in this case is greed, right? Money. But the fine print behind that motive is that Laurie didn't want to lose her lifestyle, right? She was married to a multimillionaire, right? And she had no real resources of her own. She didn't have a job. She didn't um, um, really have prospects, in order for that lifestyle that she was used to continue. So this is the point I want to make. I remember when, and I want you to think about this for yourself, because instead of sitting here wagging our fingers and saying, ha, 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 Laurie got what she deserved, is there something meaningful we can take out of this? Is there some lesson that we can apply to ourselves? Is there some kind of cautionary tale, moral imperative that we can take out of this that's useful? It's not just like a feel-good thing of me good, you bad, ha, ha, ha kind of thing, right? And this is what I think it is. Think about when you have ever faced the threat of losing your lifestyle and how you dealt with that. And did you deal with it constructively? Were you overcome with anxiety? Were you quite desperate? Were you at peace with it? How did you sort of respond to it? And I'm going to take you through briefly an experience I went through that was quite difficult and quite troubling. So for about 2 years, I worked in Johannesburg in South Africa for the country's second largest media house. And I was living in a suburb very near that media house, pretty close to where our president used to live, President Mandela, in a suburb called Houghton. I wasn't in Houghton, I was just outside of it. And one of my best friends lived in that suburb. And yeah, I went to one of the best Virgin Active gyms in the country, in a place called Melrose Arch. So, I went to a really nice upscale gym. I lived and worked in a wonderful area, a very upscale area. And after about 2 years working at this company, I was fired, right? I'm not going to go through what that involved, but the bottom line is I was fired. I took the issue up with a lawyer, with arbitration. I won the case. I was paid out a certain amount of money, but at the end of the day, we settled. I didn't want to go back to work for the company, so I effectively did lose my job. And then I sort of faced the aftermath, unemployed, looking for another job, and how long can you keep paying your rent in this sort of upscale neighborhood before you essentially run out of money and you've got to come up with something? So I applied for another job at the time, and it ended up coming down to between me and one other candidate. And in the end, we did several interviews, and in the end, it was between me and one other guy. And in the end, they chose that other guy. And so, long story short, I had to move out of my home, right? Then I had to move out of that city that I was staying in. And then I moved to another city. Later, I moved out of that city to another city, and then again and again. And so it was quite a long process of unraveling, if you want to put it that way. But the bottom line is there was a period where there was a chance that I could hold on to my life, my community, everything that I'd sort of put together. And a lot of that was based on if I could get this position that I'd applied for, because I didn't really apply a lot. I just applied for this one position. And as I say, I didn't. And that was basically when you've got to accept that you've been living at a certain kind of lifestyle, and unless something crazy happens, that's just going to come to an end. You're going to have to leave where you are and downscale, and the friends that you've had, they're going to stay where they are, and you're going to go somewhere else. It's literally like being someone who's, whatever you want to call it, upper middle class or middle class. You're literally going down a class. And when it happens to someone else, it might not be a big deal to you, but I can tell you when it happens to you, all the different areas where you've got to give things up, the friendships that you just can't hold on to anymore because you're not even in that area anymore. just the things that you were doing every day, all of that just kind of goes out the window. And this is the important part. That feeling you have where you want to hold on to it, where you sort of feel like, I just can't let this go. I have to have this. That is where the rubber really hits the road. That's kind of where you decide, am I going to accept this and try and come up with a long-term strategy and work and figure this out and whatever, or am I going to try and cheat my way out of the situation? You know, maybe I can find a person with money, or maybe I can bullshit my way into a job, or maybe I can do this or whatever. In other words, are you going to, you know, you are faced with a real obstacle, or you're going to put in the work, which is going to take a lot of time, to lift yourself up, or you're going to try and avoid it, or you're going to try and somehow just not have this happen. And if we now take this to Lori Vallow, she was in exactly the same situation. If Charles divorced her, she was going to have to make some major lifestyle changes. And you can see she was moving as it was. She was moving from transplanting from Texas to Hawaii to Idaho, right? The point I'm trying to make is it's a very difficult thing to go through. And in Lori's case, she made the wrong decisions. She tried to cheat her way out of it. She tried to bullshit her way out of it. And look at what happened. In other words, what is going on, which in a way is a good thing. It's like, I do want a better life, right? It's like, it's a healthy response to want good things for yourself, right? It's not very healthy if that comes at the expense of other people. If you're going to trample on other people, someone else's life, is someone else's life worth you having a holiday in Hawaii? You know, is it? And so the alternative to that is quite simple, where you simply accept what feels so unacceptable, and you try to, you know, find your way to where you need to. And of course, that is a bitter pill to swallow. In the same way that right here, Lori is humiliated. Right here, Lori has been, people disagree with her. People haven't believed what she's saying. This is the thing that she needed to, that bitter pill that she needed to swallow. She's swallowing it now. She needed to swallow it then. And things are now compounded. They're so much worse because she was following a fairy tale in an unreasonable way. And that's really the bottom line of what I'm getting at, is when you believe in a fairy tale for yourself, right? You believe in this sort of happily ever after fairy tale. Be aware of that, because believing in a fairy tale often awakens a nightmare. Often the fairy tale that you're going after opens the door to a nightmare to yourself, right? In the beginning, your fairy tale and your efforts to pursue a fairy tale may be a nightmare for somebody else. And it was, in this case, it was a nightmare for Adam. It was a nightmare for Charles, of course. It was a nightmare for Tyler. It was a nightmare for Tammy. It was a nightmare for JJ. It's still a nightmare for quite a few people. I think Colby was saying on YouTube yesterday, his brain's like scrambled eggs. But the bottom line is, this fairy tale that Lori believed in and got others to believe in created this massive nightmare. And so what is the solution to it? It's not believing in fairy tales. It's being real about the situation you're in and dealing with it in a real way. And before you're too quick to judge Lori, you know, it's her life and she's done what she's done. Think about a situation you are in right now, where you are either believing in a fairy tale or trying to hang on to a fairy tale or trying to pursue a fairy tale, and think, isn't what is needed here reality? Being realistic about this thing you're going after. Because if you're not realistic, it's going to create a nightmare, either for somebody else or for you, likely for both. And the antidote, as I say, to that isn't not believing in fairy tales. It's just pursuing what you want in a realistic way. Simple as that. Yeah, Joe Roberts says all fairy tales have violence in them. Quite interesting. So I think it's just important. I don't think a lot of other creators would go into this area the way I am. And I think it is quite important that we get a takeout, a positive takeout, where you say, this is what happened to Laurie. What can we learn that we can live more effectively? What can we learn from this lesson? And to the extent that you judge her and you say, I'm better than her and she's crazy, and you don't see any of what she's done in yourself, you don't learn any of those lessons. To the extent that you can look at her life and say, to what extent have I believed strange things? To what extent have I drunk the Kool-Aid? To what extent have I made some foolish decisions? To what extent have I don't know, try to use other people or I don't know, I've been overconfident in my own abilities. And again, that is where you can look at her and she can be a hypothetical cautionary tale instead of you laughing at her and you end up having to learn exactly the same lesson. Does that make sense? And so the thing I really wanted to emphasize here is that thing where it's so invisible in a way. Lifestyle. What's lifestyle? Well, lifestyle doesn't mean that much to you until you're about to lose it. And then I can tell you when you've got to downscale your home, downscale your car. There's certain stores you can't go to anymore because you just can't afford it. It's quite humbling, and to the extent that you can say, well, this is quite humbling, but it is what it is, that's fine. The extent at which you resist that and you say, I am not going to, like Laurie said, I'm not going to repent. I don't need to repent for anything. The extent to which you disconnect from that reality is going to come and bite you pretty hard. And so it doesn't make sense to, some things are as unpleasant as they are, take them on the chin, right? And the sooner you can do that, the sooner you're actually on your way to a better situation. You're not at least you're not making a bad situation worse. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of comments. I just see there's some really nasty comments in here, so I'm just going to do that. Let's just see a couple of your comments. Erica Daniels. Zenaida, good to see you here. Zenaida, what are you saying? Chad's wife was the breadwinner of that family, absolutely. It is quite scary in a way to look at Laurie and say, wow, Laurie wanted Chad. Was Chad her idea of a dream guy? But I think underneath this whole thing of being greedy, it's actually greed for power. And so I think through Chad, she could walk all over Chad, have Chad run around her pinky. Chad was elevating her to this deity. And I think that was very attractive to Laurie, is someone who's actually just a hairdresser. Someone who doesn't have a job is now being seen by certain people around, not many, but a couple of people around her think the world of her and think that she's this divine being. And even if there are just a few people, that's a world away from who she really is. And how can that not be quite kind of intoxicating, right? All right. Amanda says, I think she was a bit demon possessed. So shouldn't that demon be put on the stand then? I mean, if the demon is why she did what she did, then it's not Laurie. Shouldn't the demon then be put on the stand? Erica says, going through it now minus the autism. My husband made sure that happened. There's that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That is the incredible gift of adversity. So if you think how Laurie came out of this, what did she learn through this? Just how to manipulate people. And where is she now serving multiple life sentences, right? The other alternative is seeing adversity as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to develop. And to the extent that you do that, you've got to come up with the motivation. You've got to come up with the wherewithal to deal with that. To the extent that you say, this isn't difficult, I don't want adversity, you're not going to grow, and you're not going to need motivation. So you want to give yourself a license to not grow, not have motivation, right? So that is the flip side of it, is that as a person, you're going to develop, and it comes with some difficulty, but in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And who knows where that road is going to take you. No, she didn't get off. She didn't get off. Saying says she may be delusional, which is that. Okay. How many of you guys think that the bottom line here is that she was demon possessed? Because if you think about what you've just said there, it's a little bit like saying, Laurie saying, well, you don't agree with me, so you're a zombie. And I see that that's happening with that person, you're a zombie as well. And so by saying, you saying she's demon possessed, isn't that exactly the same thing? In other words, you just dismiss a person in a very quick and easy way using a word. Is that really what's going on here? Thanks a lot, Sarah. Thanks a lot. Anyway, I think I'm outnumbered by people who believe in that kind of thing and want that to be the bottom line. So I'm not really going to say any more. Pauline says, yeah. I mean, that's something I believe as well. Calling someone evil is all of us are of different parts, good and evil, and no, even the most evil person has a little bit of good in them, as much as that doesn't sound very palatable. And even the most good person has issues, has little issues in them. And that's what it means to be human. And, this thing where you imagine good is all good and evil is all evil, and it's as simple and black and white as that, that's a fairy tale. Just not true. It is interesting that this was like a battle of the two blondes, doesn't it? Bonnie says only a devil would murder their own children. I'm going to say something really controversial. If you say only a devil would murder their own children, if you think about Christ's sacrifice on the cross, at one point he does say to God, my God, why have you abandoned me? I mean, Jesus was literally the Son of God who died on the cross. And wasn't that permitted? Definitely is a controversial statement, but if you say only a devil would murder their own children, what about what Jacob said to Esau or to Isaac? I don't know. I think one needs to think about it a bit further than that. Someone says Chad brainwashed her, but she was stupid to believe it all. Do you really think it was as simple as that, Chad brainwashing her, not her doing some brainwashing as well? Linda says, I think she just used her beliefs to get what she wanted. Not possessed, just greedy. It's an interesting comment. Natalie says she's not in her right mind any longer, but she was right enough to be able to represent herself in court. So if you say she's crazy, whatever, she actually was able to represent herself quite, not perfectly by any means, but certainly quite well, given that she's not a lawyer. And I've actually heard some commentary from lawyers saying, under the circumstances, she did fairly well. She used the right words, right? Kim Fisher says, I think she needs help. Yep. Zircon says she loved being worshipped. Well, many people do. People on social media like being worshipped, just in a different way, right? Okay, well, we had 40 minutes. Thanks to the folks in chat. Thank you to Sarah for your super chat. I wonder whether I should share with you guys just a quick summary of the trial, and then we can just conclude with that and move on. What do you guys say? What do you guys say about that? Quick summary, or is that enough? So this is a post I put on Patreon. Doomsday Mom defense ends with a whimper. Wouldn't you say the whole trial has ended with a whimper as well? The whole trial has sort of ended with a whimper. And so I went on to write, the idea of a doomsday cult evokes a lot of sound and fury, signifying something, right? Just think about it. Anyone, all these people who talk about the end of the world, there's a lot of fist pumping and chest thumping and spittle flying, and it's all very dramatic. And then if you think about this case, it was also about doomsday, and look at how this case has ended, right? With a whimper. Laurie saying, yes, I stipulate. She doesn't even put herself on the stand, right? All of that bravado, all of that hubris. 3 people dead, and then it's like, well, I'm not even going to represent myself. I'm not even going to put myself on the stand. If you felt strong enough to kill 3 people, isn't there anything you can say about why you felt so strongly about that after the fact? So, yeah, it does seem like a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, doesn't it? Just going to go back to this. Maybe put this on the screen. Do you guys remember this cover for some documentary, I think it was? Look at how furious the sky is, right? And then think about this trial as being full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And I think an obvious takeout on this side of time, except when Charles died, was that the police accepted the sound and fury at face value. This, to me, is one of the big concerns of this whole case, of the Laurie VALLOW trial, is that the whole thing started with the police actually believing Laurie. And so for everyone who says she's crazy or she's whatever, well, people around her believed her. So no matter what you say afterwards, if you say she's demon-possessed or delusional, the fact is the people around her couldn't see that. Why is that? Let me say that again. Why couldn't the people around her see at the time that she was crazy? Why do we only know that now? Also, why at the time did family members not seem to know that? Like, one person dies, another person dies, another person dies, and no one seems to smell the coffee. Why is that? How does that happen? Anyone know? Like, how does that happen? You know, and just like the police accepted the sound and fury at face value, it wasn't just sound and fury, it was also laughter and nonchalance and whatever you want to call that whole mixture. The police accepted it, just like the cult members did. So it wasn't just the police who accepted it, cult members did, family members did. And it was obviously nothing that Laurie was able to turn into something, right? Laurie had nothing except words and knowing what other people around her thought and being able to manipulate that. But Laurie literally took nothing and turned it into something, took nothing and turned it into ideas, took certain thoughts, twisted them and turned it into permutations, thoughts that people tend to believe, and then you believe in zombies or whatever. So if you believe in demon possession, then you can believe in zombies. If you don't believe in demon possession, are you going to really think, well, yeah, that person is a zombie? Are you going to believe that? So I think Laurie would want people around her that believe in demon possession, because then that would be easier to sell. Anyway, and then Tylee disappears, and then Laurie pulled more wool over people's eyes. And at the time, people around them, including the cops, again, thought there was a lot of sound and fury signifying something. The something being whatever Laurie told them. Do you remember what Laurie said when the children were missing? Well, they're just with Melanie. What was Melanie doing about the situation? Was there part of Melanie that thought, I think maybe they just okay somewhere else? What did Melanie think? Because after the deaths of the children, if Melanie had sort of, I don't know, perhaps done more in some way, perhaps Tammy's life could have been saved. So all along in the course of 4 people dying, couldn't one person have just said, you know what, I think this is going on with Laurie? And it seemed like none of those people did that. Why not? So, so don't be too quick to sneer at the silliness of this lady or her crimes. She fooled them once, shame on them. Fooled them twice, shame on them. If it took 4 murders to finally get people around her to wake up and smell the coffee, just think about it. It takes 4 murders to get people to go, oh, sure, I think something's happening here. The shame is actually on them, on us, for being duped to begin with. And that's the kind of the takeout for me of this is we need to wake up sooner than later, right? Things are happening right now in the world where aren't we being duped in some way? Aren't we being misled in some way? Or aren't we? Do we need to wake up or don't we? Wake up from what? And so in this case, did Laurie manage to dupe the jury? Why not? Now think about what we're talking about here. Laurie killed Charles. She duped Alex into doing it. She duped Chad into marrying her after she'd murdered someone. And so all of this happened, right? She duped the people that were around her and everything. And then she comes into court. Why did she not manage to dupe the jury? What's the answer to that? Why could she dupe people right next to her in her world, but then when she's in a courtroom situation, why was the duping not successful there? That's quite interesting. Mermaid says one juror outside the court said that the text before we got rid of him clinched it for her. I mean, I think that's a great example. I mean, what else does we got rid of him mean, right? Yeah, and that's a good point. Why do some people need to fool people and manipulate people and mislead people? I think the answer is because they don't know how to do it the right way, meaning they don't know how to get a job and they don't know how to muster the effort and the energy to do things the right way. And so the other way is in a way perhaps the tempting. Maybe I can fool someone into getting what I need. And I actually see it on YouTube all the time. You can tell the story the way it is, and it's not that shocking, and it's not that popular, or you can tell the story the way that people seem to want to hear it, and it is shocking, and it is what they want to hear, and you make a lot more money. You're telling people what they want to hear. And so it just makes life a lot easier. Is that the reason why people do what they do? Because it's easier. So it doesn't matter if it's not true. It doesn't matter if we lie to one another and we say, please tell me what I want to hear because I don't want to be told what I don't want to hear. Okay. Is that how people should be rewarded? Even if it's not true. Now, again, think about why did this jury see through her lies, but the other people in her life didn't? What's the answer to that? Well, isn't it because it's important to believe in evidence? Was evidence ever shown of demons in the courtroom? Is it important to think critically about things, to look at two sides of every story. Think about how courtroom operates. You have a prosecution, but that's essentially one version of events, one perspective, and then you have the defense case. That's another version. And if you think about that just in a general sense, whenever you're considering information, should you just consider it from the information that you want to hear it, or should you kind of think about it in another way? What if this is not true? Or what if this is too good to be true? Or what if there's another possibility here? Or what if it's not quite so simple? Or what if things seemed a certain way, but maybe they weren't that way, right? That's also quite a good point. I think Laurie's looks worked like a charm for her for a while, and then they didn't, right? It's also a good point, her husband tells the police, why didn't they believe him? Why did they believe her? Why did they not believe him? So should people of faith throw these things out the window? This is to people in chat right now. Critical thinking, evidence, analysis, law, logic, and observation. Can you say, you know what, the most important thing is what I believe? If I believe it's true, that's good enough for me, right? Should people of faith throw these things out the window? When you choose to believe in somebody, whether it's a politician or, I don't know, it could even be your spouse. I choose to believe in you because I love you. Should you not make use of anything like evidence or analysis? Should it be all evidence and analysis and no intuition, like things like affect, anything like that? Should it all be sort of evidence and no, if you want to call it gut feel, is that the way? So when I say, is there evidence she's demonic, I guess I'm being quite simplistic. It's like, can you see the demon? Can you put the demon on the stand? Can the demon actually talk? In other words, in the same way that you can see this glass, right? You can see I'm holding a glass in my hand. Can you see a demon? And did the demon make a statement? Was the demon? And I suppose you could license that and say, if Laurie was possessed by the demon and the demon and she spoke to law enforcement, then the demon did make a statement. That's not really what I'm saying is, if you separate the two, can you make that statement kind of thing? But have a look at this picture, right? What do you see in this picture, right? You see something, and then how do you interpret it? You're seeing something that doesn't seem to quite make sense. And by the way, this is two pilots in a plane. They see a mountain goat in the clouds, right? So think about what you're seeing, but then what do you believe? Do you believe what reinforces you, or do you believe what makes sense? And so he says here, what's a mountain goat doing way up here in a cloud bank? Is there anything wrong with that kind of thinking? Is that thinking based on evidence, or is that thinking based on what you want to believe? Thinking based on logic, or thinking based on kind of, I don't know, what would you say? If your thinking reinforces your beliefs, it's self-reinforcing, is that good enough? So if your thought reinforces how you feel about something, is that good enough? And the best way to think about that question is if you apply it to somebody else. So in other words, if you say, you over there, if your thoughts just reinforce what you believe, is that good enough? And you might say, yeah, of course it's not good enough for that person, but what about for you? What about your own beliefs reinforcing what you think? Is that good enough? And so how can you evaluate that properly? Well, like a jury would, with evidence, with second guessing, with, and you might say, but God says you mustn't be lukewarm, you must be certain. But critical thinking allows you to be certain about what you know, right? No doubt if the VALLOW trial goes to the jury as it is, this is what I wrote a couple of days ago, Laurie is going to lose because the jury are going to be asking precisely this. You're here in court, Laurie, to defend yourself, and now that it's come to it, why didn't you do this? Are you able to say so? So now's your chance to speak up for your beliefs. Did she? In a court of law, under oath, it was Laurie's chance to really, she's been all about her beliefs and you'll never understand. Now's your chance to tell everyone who you are and what you stand for and what you believe. Did she ever do that? Did she ever do that? Because it seems, given the opportunity, Laurie has no why. She's given the opportunity to say, this is why I did what I did. This is what I was thinking. She doesn't need to necessarily confess, but she can say, she can provide some form of why to everything. And she's given that opportunity and she doesn't take it. In other words, she has no explanation when asked to give one. The prosecution has one, but she doesn't have one. And so that leaves, of course, the only explanation of the prosecution, which is straightforward, simple and solid, and it's evidence-based. And one thing I really noticed when I was watching the prosecutor doing closing arguments and I was looking at Laurie, was the prosecutor can be specific. She can mention specific statements. She can quote a person. She can provide timestamps. She can provide all of this reinforcing evidence. And when Laurie defends herself, it's all wishy-washy, it's all general. And that is one of the ways you can tell the difference between whether something's true or not. When you nail it down to specifics, does it stand up to scrutiny, right? Here's another cartoon. Can you guys read that? Hey, what are you looking at? You want trouble, buddy. You found it. It's this message in the sky, right? A guy's fishing and above him in the clouds, this ominous message. What are you looking at? You've just found trouble. And what is he actually thinking? Understanding only German, Fritz was unaware that the clouds were becoming threatening. So if you can't interpret what you're seeing around you, in other words, if you're misinterpreting what is actually being communicated to you, right? In other words, reality, you might find yourself in trouble. Let me say that again. If you can't interpret reality correctly, you might find yourself in trouble. And so in this little spiel, it's about he's unaware of what the clouds are saying to him, and he's in a boat out, I don't know if he's out to sea or in a lake, but do you think that's a good situation for him to be in? Unaware that the clouds, that the sky is threatening. I think it's quite a clever way of making my point. So for all the sound and fury surrounding the Doomsday Bomb, all the bodies littered across states, all the supposed intrigue, Laurie's trial has been pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Think about that. For all the complexity about the cult and everything that's taken place, when it came down to this trial, it was pretty straightforward. Someone was actually saying, if you actually boil down how long the jury had to think about it, it was probably 2 hours. So all of this nonsense actually turns out to be pretty straightforward. And Laurie herself has been exposed for what she always was. What has Laurie been all along? Well, hasn't she been that? If you one person looking at Laurie, you might say, she's a translated being. She's incredible. She's so charismatic. God has chosen her, blah, blah, blah. One person would say that. Another person would say, she's ditzy. She's scatterbrained. She's silly. She's featherbrained, right? That's the difference between perception and reality, or it can be, right? So think about it. Just think about this trial compared to a lot of other trials we've dealt with. This trial has been so simple and straightforward. It's lasted just 7 trial days. It's not every day that you have a defendant not defending themselves. In those 7 trial days, the prosecution presented its case and Laurie revealed her hand, which is no hand. That it couldn't be simpler. Prosecution case, defense no case. Well, what's the jury going to say? Laurie couldn't find a single witness to testify in her defense. Think about that in just a general way. You've actually managed to create a cult around you. You've got cult followers. You've got all of these people, but you can't even find one person to stand up in court and sing your praises. How does that work? And if she's had the confidence to represent herself, ironically, think about she's representing herself. She doesn't seem to have the confidence to actually represent herself, to defend herself. Isn't that because Laurie, somewhere along the line, has recognized the reality of a courtroom? That the people in the courtroom aren't dunces, aren't ditzy, aren't easy to manipulate, because they're some rules that you can't toy with, you can't play with, right? And so NBC, there's an article, NBC came up with 8 key moments of the trial. I think I'm just going to go through them really quickly. One of them is Laurie representing herself while misrepresenting herself. When Laurie defended herself now, would you say that she represented herself or misrepresented herself? Because what did she say? She said this wasn't a murder. She didn't even say it was self-defense. She said it was a family tragedy. Do you agree that that's a misrepresentation of this crime? And the jury agreed with that. The jury didn't accept Laurie's representation of the crime. Do you guys agree with that? And isn't that what Laurie did in terms of her cult? She misrepresented herself as a divine being. So if that was what she was gifted at, or that was what she had practiced doing, think about the fact that she was married 5 times. Isn't it the same thing here, right? I'm going to represent myself, but actually misrepresent myself. So to me, it was amazing to see Laurie in a dual role of murder defendant, which she clearly is, and a defense lawyer, which she clearly is not. It's fascinating because unlike most defense lawyers defending murderers, most defense lawyers aren't murderers or defending the murders of their own family members, or even thinking that they could. But I mean, it's also fascinating that Laurie was in a dual role as a cult leader. You know, she was a murderer, but also pretending to be God's chosen vessel. That was also a misrepresentation. Let's also face it, Laurie had her moments in court, you know, where she scored a point here and there. And no doubt, no one believes that more than Laurie herself. There's a guy, and you might say, jeepers, that's not true. Laurie didn't have a single moment in court. Adam Ashby of Jackson White Law, a lawyer, and he wasn't involved in this case. He actually told NBC affiliate, these are his words, I've been very impressed with her legal phraseology, with the words that she's saying many times, right? He didn't say, I was a little bit impressed, or, you know, I was impressed with her legal phraseology. He said, I'm very impressed. He said this on camera. A lawyer saying, I was very impressed with Laurie's phraseology. And that shouldn't be surprising because she had the gift of the gab in a prayer situation as well, in a cult situation as well, in a marriage situation as well, right? Yeah, that's true. She sort of testified without taking the stand. But the point is, Laurie, when presented with the opportunity to present her story for the first time, essentially like under oath, okay, what happened here? She didn't have the guts to do that. Right? That speaks volumes. So what we see is Laurie got the jargon right, even to a trained professional. And so again, that raises the question, how do we prevent ourselves being fooled by someone who says all the right things, but they actually don't know what they're talking about and they're not trained and they're actually evil? How do we avoid making exactly the same mistake? In other words, someone's out there and they know exactly what words to use and they can pass as a certain figure, right? Other professionals will say, yes, how they spoke was correct, but the difference is who they really are is not correct. It's a charlatan. And so how do we find out that someone is a charlatan? By their words, by statement analysis, by just saying, okay, well, you chose those words. Well, another lawyer is saying these statements actually all stand up to scrutiny. She's speaking very well. So then what is the giveaway? What is the giveaway? And again, you apply this to somebody else in your life, in the real world, and you say, okay, sorry, let's just do it like that. Okay, there's someone in my life. How can I tell whether those words which sound right are right? And I mean, it could even be your spouse or your child or a parent or your boss or any of those people. How can someone's saying things exactly the way that they're supposed to say it, so how do you know that it's not true? So, of course, under Laurie's sway, those under Laurie's sway seem to be less good at seeing Laurie's mess ups. So, what's the difference between, again, the jury and the cult people? I would say one of the big differences is the cult people are like, I'm talking about the people that honestly believe that Laurie was some kind of divine being. The main difference is they are very, very caught up in their beliefs. In other words, if you say it, I believe it. And my beliefs are kind of all consuming, right? Compare that to someone else whose lives aren't just entirely about their beliefs. That there's some room for something else. Action, evidence, whatever you want to call it, right? Songbird says they didn't know her, but Alex did. Alex was her own brother. Her children knew her, and her children. Look at Tylee. Tylee didn't. When she was interviewed by the police, didn't say, "My mom's crazy. Arrest her. She murdered Charles." Tylee basically defended Laurie. So they knew her and they defended her. They knew her and they believed her. They knew her and they accepted her. Right? Yeah, but the jury got to know Laurie through all the storytelling, through all the evidence. I just think it's something to think about. Like if you're coming up with a blank answer, you should really come up with an answer. I do think it shows how beliefs can be the absolute antidote to critical thinking. And vice versa. Critical thinking can be the absolute antidote to beliefs. That's often why when someone argues with a religious person with evidence, you're not going to get anywhere because it doesn't mean anything to them. Challenge them on the level that they believe, not on an evidence level, because the evidence doesn't really matter, right? And I must say, in my own personal life, I find this quite difficult. Like, when someone believes something, there's literally someone in my orbit that believes the earth is flat. And so how do you convince someone who believes something like that with evidence? Well, the evidence doesn't matter. You're going to have to challenge them in the area that they feel that they know, right? Which is their beliefs. So for example, if I said to her, how can the earth be flat, but you have time zones and one part of the earth is dark and the other part is light? They'll come with some kind of answer, and it's in an evidence sense, it doesn't make any sense. And so that is definitely a very difficult area. And I think it's a very important area to talk about because it's real. It's a real unreality. It's a real difficulty. People who just believe what they believe, and you might say, you know what? And this was a moment that really stood out to me in the Laurie VALLOW trial, where I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was Charles who said it, or Charles said it to Adam, or maybe even Charles said it to Kay. Can you guys remember who said it? It was basically this idea that Laurie would just, it was a phase she was going through, and it would just pass. You know, Laurie had these strange thoughts, these strange ideas, and it would just pass, and then it would resolve itself. Did it? And I've definitely had that same approach with some people in my life, where you kind of go, you know what, I've tried to confront them, I've struggled, you know what, real life will eventually get them where they need to go, and guess what, it doesn't. So then how do you, what are you supposed to do? It's a difficult pickle. I mean, that is the pickle. Thanks a lot, Karen. See what some of you are saying. And Zircon says you can't do anything, just walk away. But then look at what happened in this case, 4 dead bodies. So if you say, you know what, I just can't do it, well, you might say it's not my responsibility and I can't do anything. But look at what can happen if you don't interfere, if you don't intervene, if you don't know how. So maybe we need to figure out how, right? And the intervention did seem like a good strategy, because look at what it was. It was putting Laurie in a situation where she was surrounded by believers, or with some authority. And I think she was going to be stripped of her authority, in the sense that, wasn't she going to lose membership of her stake or of her church? And that would have been a real thing. Like if Laurie went to some kind of presentation or workshop with Chad, and it was like, well, Laurie's actually not a member of the church, people would start whispering and saying, you know what, this is not really right. We want her to be ordained or whatever it is, right? But what I'm trying to say is Charles's strategy was actually right, to deal with Laurie's beliefs in a believer's setting with reasonable people, right? And even so, easier said than done. And look what actually happened to him when he tried to do that. So when I wrote the script, I said, I think Laurie's best hope, perhaps her only hope in winning over at least one person of the jury, is to convince that person, maybe, just maybe, she was some sort of divine messenger. Not necessarily that believe me that I am a divine messenger, but that she believed she was, in a sense. And then that excuses her for behaving in a strange way, because she just got caught up in something, whatever. Don't get me wrong, that's not an excuse. But it could have resonated with a juror who might have thought, you know what, it's not actually Laurie who made the mistake. She just got caught up in something, and that's whose fault it is, that something. And in a way, even it's Chad's fault. And that's also something interesting, is that Laurie didn't blame Chad or even Alex for what happened. Think about that. Laurie could have given someone else the blame. She didn't actually even do that. And I'm not saying that that's a good shot. It's a very long shot, but it is better than no shot in terms of this setting. Then another thing I want to mention is, Laurie as a talented narrative stager, right? Do you agree that she is quite good at narrative staging? Like, she did manage to persuade all the police that she spoke to. You know, she got them in a different kind of mood. She got them to deviate from certainly what was going on, and that she kind of got them on board, right? So when she says a family tragedy is not a crime, that's like narrative staging. That's reframing the whole thing, and it's actually quite clever. Again, a dope with a very low IQ might drink this Kool-Aid. They might say, yeah, shame, it was a family tragedy. If you don't know the information, you don't care about it, and you don't concentrate, you might just repeat what she's saying. You know what happened to Laurie? It was a family tragedy. It was a family tragedy. In a sense, there's some truth to that. And so what you can see is a certain elegance, weak elegance, but elegance all the same, in spinning a particular reality into a euphemism of itself. Distorted, yes, but softer and friendlier and more palatable all the same. Have you guys heard that saying, you can, the best lie is a partial truth? I think there's another saying that if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big lie, but some of the most sticky lies have got an element of truth about them, right? Sandra Holford says, so pleased Charles and his family have received some measure of justice. Yeah, that is, I mean, when you hear she's been found guilty, isn't it hard not to just feel sad that at the end of all this, Charles is still dead? You know, true justice would be bringing him alive again, giving him back his life. And the best that you can do is just put Laurie back where she really has been all along. In a way, it seems like even when you get justice, it falls so short from what it kind of needs to be, you know. So I just want to emphasize this. Think about the elegance in spinning a particular reality into a euphemism of itself. And that I think is where you've got to be very careful. When someone is telling you something and it sounds really good, and it sounds you are being sold on something, and you sort of at every step along the way you're kind of thinking, wow, you know, yeah. Another thought you need to have is where you stop yourself and you need to say, isn't this softer than it actually is? Isn't it more palatable than it really is? And isn't it what I, in a way, want to hear? Someone's telling me something, but in a manipulative way, and it is palatable, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't. It's almost like being fed chocolate bars. They taste delicious, but they're not very nourishing, right? It's very palatable. It's very tasty. It's very enjoyable. It's very pleasant, but it's not really something you should be nourishing yourself with, because it's not true food. It's the same with people giving you information. It's very palatable. It's really what I want to hear, but is it really? And somewhere, I think in one of the Marvel Universe movies, Bruce Banner says to Natalie Romanoff, sometimes exactly what I want to hear is not exactly what I want to hear. It's such a good statement. And think about that in the context of cults and religion and politics and everything. Sometimes exactly what I want to hear is that exactly what I want to hear. If you in a relationship with someone, you know, your partner, your spouse, whatever, and they're telling you exactly what you want to hear all the time, shouldn't that actually raise some alarm bells? Like, why are you telling me exactly what I want to hear? Is exactly what I want to hear the truth, or is it someone manipulating you? So if Laurie seems laughable, don't be too quick to laugh. People are taken in by con artists like her every single day, and they don't know it. And part of what takes people in is that someone is likable, they're nice, they smile, they're entertaining, they friendly, right? And again, they tell us what we want to hear. There's a lot of sort of varnish and fuzziness and how can I put it, fluff involved. There's a lot of that going on, rubbing someone in a way, like and polishing their halo and polishing their ego, and then it's easier to make that person go along with what you're saying. And what is their weapon of choice? Words. What did Laurie use to get Alex to fire a bullet into Charles? Words. She didn't, and it's possible she may actually have used something else as well. I don't know if you guys know what I'm getting at. I can't remember who said this, but someone close to Laurie, I don't know if it was Adam, I can't really remember, but someone said that the relationship Laurie had with Alex was odd. Not just odd, but kind of creepy. There's a lot of touching going on, a lot of overly sexualized remarks and gestures and all that kind of thing. So one wonders whether, because you think about that, Alex killing Charles because Laurie wanted him to is quite a big thing to do for a sibling. Alex killing her children, quite a big thing to do just because Laurie wanted him to. And even if he believed in the hocus pocus stuff, it would still be quite a big thing to commit a murder and another murder and another murder. Wasn't there something in it for Alex? Something that if these individuals weren't in Laurie's life, he would stand to benefit directly. So if Laurie could benefit financially from what is going on, and she did, couldn't Alex benefit in another way from what is going on? Have you guys ever thought of that? You say, do you think Alex really died of natural causes? I think it's possible, but I think it's also possible that he was poisoned or something. With so many people dead, it seems almost reckless to accept that he just died of natural causes. It would be good to have a proper investigation into his death, I would think, right? So think about it. Laurie's weapon of choice, words, spinning words, creating a stage out of a narrative. And Laurie isn't a terrible storyteller. And that's why as soon as you say she's possessed, she's delusional, she's crazy, she's actually a pretty good storyteller. Even if the story she tells, certainly what lies behind them, if it's terrible, even if there's nonchalance and ditziness, that's all part of carrying it off. And in a sense, I think Patsy Ramsey was a very good storyteller as well. I mean, she literally did tell stories in drama school. And there's a sort of, I don't know if ditzy is the right way to describe Patsy, but there's a kind of charm that surrounds that, a kind of feminine wild thing going on that surrounds that, and that helps carry it off, right? Another thing I want to emphasize is that Laurie fell for a prosecution ploy, I think. Anyone know what I'm talking about? What is the ploy that the prosecution used that exposed Laurie? I just find this really interesting and fascinating. Was Nancy Jo Hancock really such an important witness if you think about it? Was it so important to have Nancy Jo Hancock on the stand? Maybe. I mean, the prosecutor might say yes, she was. I would say in and of herself, not really, but more than, I think she more than delivered for the prosecution, not so much in terms of her evidence, although she did say, things that were quite important to establish that that Charles told her they were separated. And of course, all of this is the day before Charles died. You know, in terms of the timeline, very timely, important evidence. But I don't think it was so important in terms of evidence, which confirmed the obvious fact that there was trouble in paradise. I don't think you really needed this witness to assert that. But to me, what was astonishing, I don't know if you feel the same way, what really came across in putting Mary Jo Hancock on the stand was Laurie's obvious hypocrisy. It exposed Laurie's obvious hypocrisy. Because what's happening is Laurie's questioning the other woman, right? Someone who's kind of having an affair with her husband. Charles is a married man, he's married to her, and she's questioning her on the stand as kind of the other woman. But even more damning, think about that, was Laurie seemingly losing her cool in front of the jury. If you think about all of Laurie's moments in this trial, right? If you think about all the people that she cross-examined, remember she cross-examined Kay. She did better and worse with different witnesses. I think it's fair to say that she did the worst with Mary Jo Hancock, right? Hello, Mel Stiller, good to see you. Anyone disagree with that? That Mary, Laurie's cross-examination of Nancy Jo was her worst moment, right? I'm gonna take you through the narrative just to remind you, but this is always the greatest danger in her representing herself, was that she could fall into a trap, and I think it might have been a trap. So remember, she asked, would you have gone on a date with him if he would have said he was married? And then Hancock said, you know, that they were in the process of divorcing, and she was aware of that. And then Laurie said, you know what, they weren't in the process of divorcing. Remember, Laurie said that. And so what's happening is Laurie is getting self-defensive in this kind of one-on-one against another woman, but she's on trial for murder. That's the issue that's really going on. So even if Laurie wins the battle in terms of cross-examining this witness, the jury are watching, and so she's going to lose the war. And guess what happened? She did lose the war, right? And so wasn't that witness put on the stand in a kind of calculated effort to get Laurie to be emotional? And isn't that exactly what she was, right? So if you take it from a prosecutor's perspective, how can you expose a bullshitter? How can you expose someone who uses words to manipulate you? How can you expose someone who, well, they say all the right things, but how do I know that there's something wrong here? Well, if when you say something they don't want to hear, they get really emotional about it. If it's not such a big deal, you saying something that they don't agree with, they should be quite matter-of-fact about it. But if they get emotional about it, it means their whole house of cards, all the spin doctoring, all the effort going into trying to convince you of your version of events is falling apart. So and so they're wasting their time. Their power is slipping, and so they get emotional. So as Songbird says, get to their ego. I don't know if that is the way to expose them, because talking is their best weapon. Talking is their skill. So I think the answer is to get them to show an emotional response, and then see what that emotional response is and see what that tells you. So in other words, it's kind of actions is louder than words. So that person getting emotional, what are they getting emotional about? That person getting emotional, how does that jive with the things that they've said about how they deal with life and whatever? You know, can they practice what they preach, kind of thing? And I think emotions are often truer for all of us than our words. all of us to some extent present a mask and present a persona and present a version of ourselves. And I think especially when we get angry, I think that's the real person honestly shining through. And anger is often evidence of pain, and pain is the heart of a person. So, people often see anger as anger. They don't actually see it as a symptom of pain, right? So when Laurie gets angry at the at Nancy Jo Hancock, make no mistake, there probably was somewhere along the line pain as a result of her marriage with Charles no longer working. Whatever that pain was, maybe it was the pain of she can't keep up the lifestyle, maybe it was the pain of that fairy tale period came to an end, maybe it was the pain of whatever, but there definitely is pain there. And so there was anger as well. And so do you remember when Laurie said, do you go on dates with married men? And in the article, they describe her shooting that back. Laurie shot back those words. That was something that the jury also saw. Is that going to be enough to convict her? No, but it's one more little block in the wall, right? And the prosecution objected, saying Laurie was being argumentative. Of course she was. The judge sustained the objection there. The prosecution objected again after Laurie asked whether Charles had responded to a text message asking if he was a good kisser. Now, literally what's happening here is I'm sure Laurie is trying to get an emotional response in a way from the jury, but based on her knowing her own emotional response. And Kay said that the question was irrelevant. The prosecutor and the judge sustained the objection. Hancock was asked whether Charles had opened up about his rocky relationship with Tylee. All of this stuff is going to lead to people close to the event being quite emotional about it. Hancock said she didn't recall there having been that conversation. And then she said, I'm sure you don't. She sort of mumbled under her breath. And then the prosecution objected to her making side remarks. But anyway, I hope I'm reminding you of all the nonsense that came about as a result of putting that particular witness on the stand, and that is what exposed her to the jury. So it's not so much evidence and specific facts that I think that witness was there to do. That witness was there to expose the real Laurie, to expose her real emotions, to expose the hypocrisy and the vengefulness and the bitterness and the little snide remarks and that snippiness. And didn't she succeed, right? So none of this was a good look for Laurie, who came across arguably embittered, holding a grudge, vengeful, but at the very least, emotional. All of these would be perfectly understandable emotions. In any other situation where you put someone in this situation, I was in a relationship, a long-term serious relationship with that person. Now they are interested in that person. Now I'm going to confront that person. How can anyone not be emotional in a situation like that? How can someone not have a few choice words? How can a person not just be emotional, right? But the thing is, you're in a courtroom now, and you've got a jury watching, and so none of that is tolerable from a lawyer cross-examining a witness. But on a human scale, you can say it's completely understandable that you'd feel that way, but you're missing the point. You're on trial for murder. So at one point, Laurie apologized to the judge for making comments after her questioning, and she actually had to say to the judge, somewhere in the middle of her cross-examination of Nancy Jo Hancock, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I won't do that again. And the judge actually said to her, please stop. It was one of the firmest admonitions the judge ever made to her, and it was made within this scenario. And of course, the jury would have seen all of this from their front row seats. Then, who do you think was the most damaging witness of all? in this trial? Who's the most damaging witness? Bab says, I've not watched the trial. She makes me ill. Okay. I think Adam Cox was incredibly damaging. Why? Because he was the closest person to Laurie, her own brother. Remember, the one brother murdered Charles, the other brother loved Charles, the other brother defended Charles, the other brother was supporting Charles. But nevertheless, this was another brother. And this brother understood Laurie, grew up with Laurie, understood how her beliefs went wild. And he also understood the moment Charles was dead, he knew what had happened. Again, it's quite hard to hear that now in 2025 and think, if you knew that he'd murdered, that she had murdered Charles, why did all those other murders happen? Yeah, Adam did seem very credible. But at the end of the day, the optics also count. Laurie's own brother testifying against her was devastating to her case. And Adam was able to sum up Laurie's craziness in a simple, easy to understand nutshell. You know, I can be very eloquent talking about Laurie, but how much does that really matter compared to a family member being eloquent? The family member really knows her. You know, how well, it's like, how well do you know the case, right? Look at this. Look at the statement that he made. Laurie had told people that Charles was no longer living, that some guy named Ned was inside of his body, and that there was a zombie living inside of him. And this was after Laurie somewhere claimed that she had never uttered or used the word zombie. So you've got her own brother saying, yeah, my sister said that he was a zombie. And of course he would know because Laurie had said this to Charles. Charles said it to the police. Charles was aware of it. So now how many witnesses said that they were aware of that? So then he also went on to say this. This is Adam's own words. And I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecutor played it in her closing arguments, which I thought was brilliant to do that. Laurie talking crazy about she's a translated being. All these things all added up into that moment and that morning. Once I found out on Saturday that Charles was shot and killed, no doubt in my mind that they killed him. That's a feeling that I got, right? So see how elegantly connects Laurie's craziness, she's a translated being, all of these things added up, including the zombie stuff, into that moment, that morning. Well, that's exactly true. That's exactly what it was. All these things added up to that moment. The part that is saddening, distressing, dismaying is if he was so sure then, couldn't he have done more to save the lives of the three other people that were about to die? I mean, all of this happened in the middle of 2019. It was by a year later that three other people started dying. It all happened in like September, right? So couldn't that have been prevented? Yeah, and you might say hindsight, but apply it in the story and say, but didn't he have the foresight anyway? And what did he do with it? Who did he talk to about it? What happened? Did he make any effort? So, you know, Laurie thinking she's a translated being also isn't such a far cry from a triple convicted murderer thinking she could represent herself in a murder trial, right? She was a double convicted murderer at the time, now triple. And did she succeed? I don't know if I need to mention this. I think it's quite obvious, but well, let me ask you guys, what is the obvious flaw in the self-defense spiel? what is the obvious flaw in the self-defense spiel? Erin says, I thought Kay was the strongest. Kay was also a really strong witness. But in a way, Kay had more of a bone to pick with Laurie in the sense that it was her brother, it was JJ. So you could, in a way, say that Kay wasn't, there's no love lost between the two. And I think, although that's true, and although I think what Kay said was true as well, it's different with a sibling. A sibling is going to know her through and through, right? Songbird says no witness for her. Zircon says not returning the phone. Isn't it the fact that he was shot a second time while he's lying on the floor? Remember, it's the self-defense thing, right? The self-defense thing. So Derek Bumgarner, the medical examiner, he performed Charles Vallow's autopsy. He testified the first shot came at a range of 2 to 4 feet. That's really, really like point blank. But the critical failure here, and I do think if there wasn't a second shot, I don't know whether you necessarily would have gotten a conviction here. And that is particularly frightening. And do you think I'm wrong when I say this? If there wasn't that second shot, because the second shot absolutely proves that it wasn't a question of self-defense, right? He was lying on the floor, almost dying, in the process of dying, lying on the floor when Alex stood over him and shot him, right? So do you agree with me if I say if he didn't shoot him a second time, Laurie could well have gotten away with this? Because you could say there's enough circumstantial evidence with regard to the prayers and the all the circumstantial evidence. But what about strong evidence, right? What about strong evidence? Well, that is arguably the strongest evidence against the self-defense thing. You must remember, self-defense is a legitimate defense, or can be a legitimate defense. And so you need strong evidence to disprove a legitimate defense or a defense pretending to be one, right? All right. The second shot at a short exit wound. And that, to me, what is fascinating about that is how a detail like that can rise to the level of being so important that the kind of wound against his back, almost like the spider web in the window of the Ramsey case, this kind of web, wound, the kind of wound is so idiosyncratic because the skin is lying against the ground. And not only the bullet being in the floor, but the kind of wound are providing like double confirmation. Also, the angle of the bullet through him, of providing all confirmation that he was lying on the ground, he was lying on a firm surface when he was shot. A clever defense lawyer would have offered a different scenario to that. Like, couldn't he have just been standing against the wall? He got shot, he stumbled backwards, he was standing against the wall and he got shot like that, right? A skilled defense lawyer could have played with that idea and just created doubt around that. And of course, Laurie's not a skilled defense lawyer. The second wound was to the abdomen and upward. By the way, that's a similar wound to what Vincent van Gogh suffered. Does anyone know that? The wound that Vincent van Gogh suffered came up through his abdomen, just like the wound on Charles Vallow. And that's also why I believe Vincent van Gogh didn't take his own life. He was shot, right, by somebody else. I've written a book about that. It's just really interesting that you have exactly the same kind of wound in a case that I dealt with in this case. So if there's one shot, Laurie might have had a sniff at winning her case. Literally, Alex effed up by playing the big hero. And think about it as well. Alex, like Laurie, was also powerless. He's a failed, washed up stand-up comedian. And so because he feels like such a nobody, over Charles, who's this successful millionaire, this person that has had such an impact on his sister's life. They've had, they've lived all over the world and done all sorts of things. And now he can stand over this guy like a god in a way and shoot him and think that he's really powerful. And it's a sign of just what a weak person he is. And because of that arrogance and because of that need to assert his power, in a way, he's cost Laurie a very strong chance of, in a way, it's the reason she lost this case. I just think it's interesting to think about that they, in a way, both siblings shared the same sense of powerlessness, and the way they dealt with it was in a very weak way. And that's why what I said at the beginning of this live, where I was talking about, if you lose your lifestyle, you are in a sense, or if you're losing your lifestyle, you are in a sense powerless. But the way out of that is to acknowledge and to realize the power you do have, where you say, but I'm a talented person. I can figure this out. You know what? There are going to be opportunities. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. Instead of kind of being so overwhelmed by being helpless that you immediately jump to the next step where you say, I've got to cheat my way out of this. I've got to lie my way out of this. I've got to steal my way out of this. I've got to manipulate my way out of this. That's essentially a person saying, I know that I'm weak. And so I've got to rely on weak strategies to succeed, right? That's true of all criminals, that they don't believe in themselves, they don't have any agency, and they understand that they actually have no power. And what they want is power over their situation. So why did her killer do it? Because in real life, he lacked real power. That's the why behind all of this. If you don't have real power in the world, what do? Invent it. You simply believe you have it, or you try to convince others you do. And that's, I think, quite a sophisticated level where if you're starting to suspect someone is conning you, these are the questions you might want to ask in your mind when you're testing it. And it might be AI that is playing on a computer, or AI generated script that's meant to kind of hypnotize you. How do you interrogate that, right? Well, if the person who's doing it actually doesn't have real power in the world, in other words, they can't say who they are. You have many avatars on YouTube and in social media, they can't say who they are because they've got to hide it, because what they're doing isn't right. So one of the quickest and simplest tests of whether you're dealing with a bullshit, are they able to identify themselves, like who they really are? And also, do they have any kind of track record in terms of dealing with problems in their lives? Because what they're dealing with here could just be they're inventing a scenario that might sound like it works, but does it? Because what they're doing is they simply invent something, believe in it, and then they try and convince others that they have that as well, right? In other words, it's that magical thinking thing. If you just believe it strongly enough, it's true. If you just believe it strongly enough, you can have it. You know what the magic is in getting what you want? Hard work, effort. So the idea is like 1%, but the magic is the 99% of doing. But the real magic is really when you say, you know what, if I just do that work, that's something I know I can do. If I just do the action, then I actually just know it's just a matter of inevitability. The thing that I want, the thing that I need, the thing that I'm working towards, it's just a matter of time before I'm going to have it. That's just another way of thinking about it. Not that just believing in the 1% of the magical idea is going to be enough. No, believing in the 99% of effort, that if you just keep that effort, the wall that is standing in your way just has got to fall away eventually. There's something to me very reassuring about that compared to the other one where you go, la, 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 believe in that. Okay, I'll just wait now until it happens, and it just doesn't happen. Okay, I'll just try and believe in that a little bit more, right? So in that sense, where someone says, just believe it, I'm going to invent the saying, the secret, whatever. Just believe it, and I'm going to try and convince others to believe the same thing. And now I'm becoming powerful just because people are believing my blah blah blah. And then you say, in that sense, who is the fool? The fool or the fool who follows him? And in that sense, that's the real bottom line to Laurie VALLOW. There's so many people here in chat and everywhere that are laughing at her, that are criticizing her, that are minimizing her. Basically, ha ha ha! It's so obvious. She's foolish. She's deluded. She's crazy. But who is really the fool here? The fool or the fool that followed Laurie? Because there were quite a few that did. Think about the power of cults. It's all about giving people a why. It's a manufactured why. So, I mean, if you really want to give people inspiration, give them a why that's rooted in reality and rooted in experience and rooted in real life. But you can also give people a manufactured why, right? And a manufactured why can be a reason all the same for suspending reality. It's instantly, this is how your difficult problem is going to be solved. So manufactured why, it's just what I want to hear. It's not going to be a problem. I don't have to worry about it. You can suspend reality even more and project your will onto someone else. As soon as you do that, that person is giving up their own power and believing in you, which gives them power over you. So in the case of the doomsday thing, the why, what is the why? Let me put that on screen. Let's see how many of you guys are thinking while I'm talking about thinking, how many of you are thinking yourselves? In the doomsday thing, what is the why? In other words, what gets people caught up in, I want to listen to what you're saying about doomsday, right? In a doomsday thing where people are just craving to belong to a particular group, what's the why behind that? Why are they craving? What are they craving? Well said. That's really good to see, right? What they are craving is immunity against destruction, right? And you can imagine what can be more scary than the world ending, and the world ending for everybody, right? And so somebody's saying, hey, horrible things are about to happen, but I can provide you with safety from that, right? And a really, those of you who know me and like me, I highly recommend you watch Turning Point on Netflix. I think it's called something about the bomb, the Cold War and the bomb, or something like that. The Cold War and the something, the bomb. What's so powerful in that is how governments in the past have used the fear, which is a totally rational, legitimate, realistic fear of nuclear annihilation, of nuclear weapons being used. People have used that to control other people. And it's arguably being used today as well. And so when you can provide immunity against that destruction, it's very compelling. It's very tempting. It's very reassuring. It's very nice to have. But can anyone really legitimately offer that? I mean, that's the real terror, is there is no immunity against it, right? But somebody saying that they have it, it's definitely going to make you feel better. It's telling you exactly what you want to hear. That's a really good example of that, right? So, it's this idea that what is doomsday? What is the apocalypse? It's the world is ending for everyone. It's the worst case scenario. But if you do this, not you, if you do this, you'll be safe. Not, you won't be safe, but you'll be safe. It's the worst case scenario. The whole world's ending. If you do this, no, not you. You're not part of our group. If you do this and you say that, you're going to be safe. pretty reassuring. Is it very rational? But it's a feeling, it's beliefs that are likely to resonate with quite a few people. There are quite a few people who, when confronted with this, are going to say, I'm really overwhelmed by this. I'm really afraid. And they wouldn't be wrong. And you're saying, here's a solution to your anxiety. There's a formula. And that's, in a way, kind of what Laurie was offering. And, if you can convince them of your story, your source material is at least half authentic. If your source material is half coming from somewhere that's familiar to them, it's definitely going to resonate. And so Laurie's beliefs aren't that crazy. Some of them are based on things that people already believe anyway. It's not that crazy. And that's the part that I think is scary, is that this is possible. It's possible to manipulate people in these areas because they are vulnerable. Let me put that in another way. Because we are vulnerable, because I am vulnerable, because you are vulnerable, because all of these are legitimate fears, because we have a reason to be anxious. Again, go and watch that thing, Turning Point, on Netflix. It's incredibly well done, but it's also incredibly disturbing. And the last thing I want to bring up here is never underestimate affect. Wow, I can't believe I've been speaking for an hour. That's an hour, 2 hours. It's an hour longer than I thought I would be. Cassandra Inklin, who was one of the Chandler police officers who arrived at the home when Charles was there, he testified how calm Laurie was that day. And Laurie was very quick to say, are you a psychologist? I mean, it really doesn't mean anything. People, and how many of you have heard this before? Different people respond in different ways. Okay, but I think almost all of us can say there's a basic way to respond to certain things. Just a basic way, and I think many people would say a lot of that was missing with Laurie. Why? Because she seemed very kind of ordinary and kind of nonchalant. Her own husband has been killed, but actually murdered. So if you think about it, if he was murdered, you can actually understand that nonchalance. It's an act. The nonchalance is part of a spiel. The nonchalance is part of the whole manipulating thing. So there's a message behind that effect. It's not like Laurie acting the way that she isn't not an act. It's an act. It's meant to take you out of the gravitas that you're feeling. Like someone coming there, wow, someone was murdered, but the person here doesn't seem very affected by it. I guess I'm not going to be very affected by it either. No, you should be. So in the same way, we were saying, how do you interrogate someone who is verbally skilled? Right? They know how to say all the right words. We'll never underestimate affect. Are they too passionate? Are they too intense? Like if they are talking about certain things, are they beating their chest? Is it too kind of, they're stirring you up with their own emotions, but in a way that just seems a bit excessive if you think about it. In other words, the emotional side or the affect side, does that jibe with what's being told? The other side of it is the emotional thing too effective? It's like, what you're saying, I just totally feel it. I'm totally on board with it because I feel it, even though I can't really understand it, right? A recording of her interview with police was played in the court. It shows her laughing. It's not just that she's nonchalant, she's actually laughing. And to me, one of the most significant moments, and as far as I know, they didn't play it in court, I may have missed it, but for me, one of the most significant moments is where the officer says, okay, tell me what happened. And Laurie literally bursts out laughing, and she's got to literally cover herself she's got to hide her face because she's laughing, because she's like, I don't want to show. And in a way, by doing that, it's almost an analogy for, I'm so overcome that I'm putting my head in my hands. But the thing is, she's laughing. She's overwhelmed with laughter, not with grief, right? And that was a very, very decisive moment, I thought, in that interview. And, Songbird, if you say she was in a good mood, who wouldn't be? You're about to win the $1 million lottery. Wouldn't you be like, sure, this is all over. It worked out really well. Okay. Things can only get better from here, right? Erin says she separates herself. Yeah. You could even say she compartmentalizes. The fact that she can be her own defense lawyer, which she did fairly well, and she's the murderer, that is classic compartmentalization. I mean, play this role, even though you're that person. During cross-examination, Laurie said that Inkland could not determine how she was supposed to act. Have you got a degree in psychology? Do you know what a person should act like if they're in a stressful situation? In hindsight, or not even in hindsight, just, here we are on verdict day. Was the officer right? Did the officer know what someone should act like in a stressful situation? Think about it. She's a police officer. She sees people in a stressful situation all the time. The flip side to all of this is, if the officer felt that she was nonchalant and felt that she wasn't behaving appropriately, why was this ultimately classified as a self-defense thing? Why? I mean, that's pretty disturbing as well, is that she may say on the stand that she didn't behave appropriately, but at the time, did she make enough of a stink about it that it led to a proper murder investigation? Pauline, I don't know if, I think delusional is also a label. It's also just a quick label. That's who Laurie is. Laurie, is it delusional to want a better lifestyle? Is it delusional to she just happened to be using religion as a manipulative schema, If she used something else, would it have been that delusional? Someone who's able to wed 5 different men, I don't think all 5 men thought she was delusional. I think all 5 men totally fell in love with her, were charmed by her, thought she was awesome. I think when she won, did she win Miss Texas, or was she? But they didn't think she was delusional either. You can't say once she's convicted that she's delusional. It is, did anyone notice she was delusional in real time when all of this was playing out? In other words, literally, did anyone notice she was delusional when Charles was murdered? Charles, yes, but anyone else? And you can't say, yeah, of course they noticed, okay, but not enough to tell anyone, not anyone to stop everything that followed, right? In any word to describe a person ends up being a label that actually doesn't describe them. So if you describe someone as a monster, as a psychopath, and think about whether you do this in your own life, someone you don't like, an ex, as soon as you describe anyone with a label, you kind of dehumanizing them. You might as well call them a zombie. But in terms of a criminal, as soon as you do that, you're saying it's too difficult to figure out who this person is, and God forbid that you relate their craziness to yourself. It's far more comforting just to put that little label box there, and then we've done it. And this is the hard work of true crime, is where you try and find out who a person is in a way where somewhere along the line, and I always find somewhere along the line, when you really figure out who a person is and you lift up that sort of can of worms, somewhere along the line, there's a little bit of a feeling of sympathy you get for them or compassion that's unsolicited. You don't like sit there and go, oh, sure, I actually feel so sorry. It's like you really don't like this person. They do all sorts of things that are terrible and horrible, and they are so dastardly. That they lie, they steal, they cheat, they murder. But somewhere along the line, you see something in that human weakness that you recognize, and you can't help just having a little bit of sympathy for it. Why? Because you've recognized a common humanity in them. That's when you finally figured someone out. Is when it's not all, or it's not just this one simple thing. It's this multidimensional thing. And let's face it, we are all actually human beings capable of silliness. So you should try and resist the urge to reduce a person to a label, because that is a source of evil. Exactly what Laurie did, that Tylee is a zombie, label, dead, person is murdered, because you've now reduced that person's her own child. Zombie, label, now can actually get rid of them. JJ, zombie, label, can get rid of them, right? You couldn't get rid of that person without the label. And think about that in mass politics, when you refer to whole groups of people via label. I'm not going to mention all different names, but you can even refer to people as rats, or in sort of animal terms, dogs, whatever. But as soon as you reduce a person to a label, you're stripping them of their humanity. And you know why that is so dangerous? Because imagine that being done to you. Imagine you in a situation where someone has power over you and they decide you're a rat or a dog or a bug or an insect or something. What we need to do, all of us, is hang on to our mutual humanity. What we need to do, all of us, is to, even the people we despise, criminals, murderers, not reduce their humanity as much as we hate them, or as much as we hate what they do. Hate the sin, not the sinner, right? Does that make sense? It's very hard to do, but when we do that, we give up our own humanity, and then there's if you've given up your own humanity, you can't appeal to someone else to hold on to theirs on your behalf, right? So don't be fooled into thinking you need a degree in psychology to understand effect. Most people know when behavior doesn't ring true. And odd behavior isn't direct evidence, but it's very underestimated. So often defense attorneys convince you that don't pay any attention to strange behavior. The person didn't react the right way. Don't pay any attention to it. No, it's kind of like you should judge a book by its cover, but you don't stop there. In other words, your entire basis of a person, in the same way that's not a label, it's not judging a book by its cover. In the same way, it's a starting point. I've got a little leaflet here, right? Of course, I'm going to judge it by its cover. The cover is giving me a little bit of an insight into the rest of what's in it. So, of course, the cover is the starting point. And in the same way with crime, when you come to a crime, you know nothing about it. You know so little about the person and the situation and the dynamics and the subtleties and the evidence. But what you do have right from out the gates, you've got effect, right? And if that doesn't ring true, that's where you have the cover, and then you open the cover and you get to see the rest of it. But please don't tear off the cover and say, I'm not going to look at the cover. I'm not going to look at the effect. Is a really important starting point. And if the cover is hinky, you might want to spend a bit more time paying attention, right? And so let's face it, how many other cases have we seen effect that some described as iffy? Casey Anthony, she was partying while her child was missing, but just in general, her effect. Chris Watts, you couldn't quite tell what was going on, the sermon on the porch, but there was something iffy about his effect. Guess what? That effect was a mask. It was a real thing that nonchalance was there to hide the fact that something really, really, really horrible has taken place. And a lot of people in our ordinary lives also use affect. They hide their true feelings and instead they deceive us with words. Letitia Stork, Jodi Arias. Remember Jodi Arias, it's not quite the same thing, but remember that answering machine message she left for Travis. The giddiness, the giggling in that thing. But Jodi Arias is also very good at effect. How about the Ramses? Is effect also important in that case, or is that a case where people too wrongly judged books by their covers? Or is effect something that's been underestimated in the Ramsey case? How about the McCanns? Is that a case where they judge the book by the covers, or they shouldn't have, or it doesn't apply in that case? What about Amanda Knox? Amanda Knox has right now brought out another book. What about Amanda Knox? Should you judge that book by its cover? What is the cover in that book? Amanda Knox also, nonchalance, laughing, and you might say, yeah, she's just a goofy kid. But nobody else. There were many other young people in that corridor. None of them were laughing and kissing. All of them were like, shit, someone has been murdered. And no one was as close to Meredith as Amanda Knox was. So is the effect, is it something? Is effect something that you need to care about? Well, this trial once again has shown that it is. Right? Never underestimate effect. It's not enough to make your case, but it's enough to get the wheels rolling, in my opinion. When it's totally inappropriate, like when somebody has died, even if you don't like that person, can I just indulge you guys for a moment? I went on a trip one morning. I drove out with a friend, and as we came to the outskirts of town, we saw there was a horrific accident, and there were 3 people. You couldn't see them because they were covered, but there were 3 people that had died at that scene. But you could see that it was a horrific accident, and you could also see that there was at least one person that had died. We later found out it was 3 young children, actually. But one of them was lying in the road covered. And I didn't know that person at all. I didn't know those people at all. I didn't even know what happened. And yet that incident affected me that day. Yeah, we were driving. It was like, maybe you should drive a bit more carefully. And I remember when we drove back and we passed that same scene, by then the police were gone, the vehicles were gone, and so on. I still remember remarking to my friend, you know what, we did this morning. Those people, their lives are over, and they'll be over forever. And that's like a somber moment, and it's not even someone that I know. For someone to go by something like that, and for whatever reason, something amuses them and they're laughing, there's something wrong with that. And it doesn't mean you have to be connected to someone to care about someone. It means, where's your humanity? And so someone who's in a situation where it's a police investigation, they're laughing, that should be very disturbing. That should be, there should be a problem with that. I'm just trying to think of a case where someone was laughing and they turned out to be innocent. I seem to remember there was something like that where someone just had that weird personality trait where they did that. But the point is, it's not common. It's not often. What else can I say? Whimper warning. The first real warning we got that Laurie wasn't going to testify came during the confrontation between Laurie and Charles's sister Kay, right? Didn't some of you think this is going to be interesting, to put it mildly? Like when Laurie cross-examines Kay, we're gonna see sparks fly. And then what happened? Laurie just asked her 4 questions, and then it was like non-question questions, like, were you there when this happened? Obviously not. And so that was a sign that not a prediction. That was basically a warning that Laurie was going to come out of this trial with a whimper, and that's exactly what happened. And so one of the best predictors of behavior of any person, if you're wondering what someone's going to do, well, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. That's true of all of us. That's true of you, me, someone on trial, and everybody else. And that's why if you want to change your behavior, you want to change your life, that is the biggest indictment. It's like, if you want to suddenly turn a new leaf or you want to do something different, the likeliest thing that you're going to do in the future is exactly what you've done in the past. I find that quite a kind of a powerful thought, but one that can even be paralyzing. In other words, if you want to just break through that, how do you break through that? And unfortunately, the simple answer is action. If you just do something often enough, even if you say, well, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, if you've never done something, you better start doing it. And if you can do it regularly enough, what do they say? After 21 days, it becomes a habit or whatever. In other words, if you repeat it enough times, that does become part of your psychology. But doing it once or thinking about it once doesn't make it anything. And being aware that, well, the best predictor of future behavior is your past, that is being realistic. That's the opposite of the fairy tale where you say, yeah, I would really like that. Yeah, but the best predictor of the future is the past. Okay, I guess that's not that likely unless I do something, right? Not somebody else do something or someone else to blame. What can I do, right? And then finally, Laurie can't find anyone to defend her, including herself. That to me was the biggest indictment of this whole thing. All of this was about believe in me, believe in yourself, believe in this being that is going to bring about the end of the world. And then when it comes down to it, when you must believe me and we're in court and it's about evidence, I can't even stand up for myself. I can't even state what my beliefs are. I'm going to completely go out with a whimper and not even actually defend myself. No one testifies for Laurie, not her parents, not her son, not a single one of those cult members. Where are they? All Laurie could come up with was basically a lie. Laurie thought, if I just lie, I'll get away with it, because isn't that what she did her entire life? The best predictor of the future, what Laurie's going to say in this case, is the past. So what does she say? There was no plan to murder Charles. No evidence has shown that. You can't simply say that and expect that to work, although it can work with the feeble-minded. It has worked with some of the feeble-minded. It's quite hard for that to work when you've been peppered with evidence on and on and on with the prosecutor. If the case was only 10 minutes long in total, maybe Laurie could have won with a statement like that. So here is narrative license again. Not showing substantial evidence isn't the same as not showing any evidence. That's another thing that you must really think about. There's so many people who have been implicated in crimes only to not be convicted, and then they say, there's no evidence against me. No, correction. there's not sufficient evidence. But of course, you can, outside the courtroom, you can go on TV and say, there's no evidence against me, because technically that's true. Sufficient evidence when the jury decides you're guilty becomes evidence. Insufficient evidence when the jury decides you're not guilty becomes no evidence. But in reality, in reality, insufficient evidence isn't no evidence. A DNA sample that's 80% could be something doesn't mean that it's not something. It just means it's insufficient. So you can't actually technically say that 20% means it's 100% no evidence, if that makes sense. Songbird says, I'm taking up the guitar again after the years. That's good to hear. Good luck with that. So we see this argument used successfully in the Ramsey case, also the McCann case, and the Knox case, that arguably anyway, that there isn't sufficient evidence, especially in DNA evidence, and that's in DNA and evidence in all three of these cases. There's insufficient evidence in all three cases, DNA, which means there's no evidence. Is that the same as saying there isn't any evidence? And so what did the prosecutor say? She said there is sufficient evidence for the jury to find Laurie VALLOW guilty. Do you remember that was her rebuttal? Laurie said her thing, and then she came back and she was quite emotional. She was quite, what's the word? Riled up. Is that the word? She's quite sort of stirred up. And she kind of countered, but Laurie just said there's not sufficient evidence. And remember, the judge says you can't take what someone says in closing arguments as evidence. Evidence is evidence. You can't take a statement as evidence. But people often do, right? And so the prosecutor says there is sufficient evidence for the jury to find Laurie guilty, and then the judge agreed. And what happened? She was found guilty. Someone saying loudly, confidently certain things doesn't make it true. And how often did we hear Laurie saying things in a way that was, it really rang true? You know, you hear a voice, it sounds almost like the song of a bird or the ring of a doorbell, right? But what she's saying is simply not true. But she carries it off in a way that is almost sweet or whatever. And you can imagine she's a woman saying it to a man that has a different impact than otherwise, except think about her cult followers. Almost all of them were women except for Alex. So, you know, words shouldn't be allowed or able to just stand on their own, right? And that is literally what Laurie conjured with, was words. And so we've got to look beyond statement analysis and look at things like affect and emotions and a longer term thing than just what the person is telling us. And I think one of the biggest clues to whether we're being manipulated is what I said. Am I being told exactly what I want to hear? Because I don't want to be told exactly what I want to hear, or do you? Do you want to be told exactly what you want to hear? I mean, let's say we're talking about the weather. Do you want to hear exactly what you want to hear the weather is going to be tomorrow, or do you want to hear what the weather is going to be tomorrow? Because how is it going to help you to be told it's going to be beautifully sunny and there's going to be a light breeze that comes up later on, and it's going to be incredible? That's great. That's what I want to hear. But actually, it's going to be windy and the other things going to happen. How can you prepare for life by hearing what you want to hear when you need to be told what reality is? I mean, believing what you want to hear and only exposing yourself to what you want to hear isn't going to help you in real life. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to harm you, right? So can you see how, like something like the weather, being told the weather, being informed of reality might not be really what you want to hear, but it is kind of what you need to hear so that you can prepare for the next day, so that you know what you need to do, right? So that you are armed. Whereas someone who's telling you what you want to hear, it benefits them and you are the loser in that exchange. So don't put up with people who tell you what you want to hear. And try and be aware of people who are doing that, who are telling you what you want to hear. YouTube is full of them. YouTube is full of people who benefit at your expense. Might not be a cult, but they literally are thinking what you want to hear, telling you what you want to hear. They get benefit out of popularity and money, and you lose because you are failing every time to think critically and to know how to deal with your world in a effective way. And so, to the extent that that person benefits and literally, it's like a transaction. To the extent that you are duped and manipulated, they are succeeding in manipulating you and enriching themselves as a result of it. So they do it more and more. Should the most popular YouTubers be manipulators or should they be truth tellers? Should the most popular YouTubers be bullshitters and populists and opportunists, or should they be authentic? What's the answer? And I think you can definitely make the case that sometimes I need to be comforted. Life is hard. Sometimes I just need, and I sometimes listen to ASMR, and sometimes you do need a break. But the bulk of your life shouldn't be escapism and hearing what you want to hear, because then the bulk of your life is going to end up being a fairy tale that becomes a nightmare, literally. Happy 61 says, I don't want to be manipulated. Mel Stiller says, I don't want to hear only what I know will make me happy. Okay, thanks everyone for being here. This is much longer than I expected. I actually thought this was going to be really short, but it is what it is. I hope you've found some value in this. This is one of the most ranty lives I've done in a while. Just a quick thanks to all the members here and all the super chats. Karen, thank you. Pauline, thank you. Sarah, thank you. Sandra, thanks for being a member for 31 months. Rudka as well. By the way, exclusive for the members here, I'm going to be traveling quite soon. I'm going to be going to another fabric of a case, and I'm only going to be showing the members where I am. I don't like showing my movements to just ordinary subscribers, a bit of a security risk. So the members are going to enjoy some boots on the ground coverage coming up in the next couple of weeks, actually in May. Yeah, so in May. So do consider becoming a member. Also, join Patreon if you haven't already. There are 20 audiobooks on Patreon. About half of them are short audiobooks on the $5 tier, the other half longer audiobooks on the $10 tier. It's on patreon.com/TCRS. So would be good to have you there. Yeah, I think that's it from me. What did I also want to mention besides the members only? For those who know about the other channel, Team Peachtree channel, remember I spoke about the murder of Vincent van Gogh? I'm going to be in Auvers-sur-Oise, where Van Gogh spent the last 2 months of his life. I'm literally going to be there at the end of this week. So if you guys want to follow that journey, also members only on that channel, I'll literally be in France. So for those of you who are into art, into Vincent van Gogh, or just into travel and something different, you might want to follow me on the Team Peachtree channel. So yeah, just a little bit of a reward for those of you who've watched till the end, just a little bit of a news announcement. So hope to see you guys there. So have a look at your last couple of messages. Happy it's Hoppy. Hoppy61 says, great to hear you tonight. Erin says, I've always loved your rants. Okay. Kaleido Mindscape says, great to put a face to the voice. So often I hear, I thought you were a 70-year-old Pakistani or something. Sam Jacobs, thanks for that. Sam says, we got an extra treat to Nick's philosophy for making a change. I feel that true crime on its own, if you just do the true crime thing, just the evidence, just the verdict, just the murder, just the autopsy evidence, just the blood and everything, all the lies, the deceit, if you just have that on its own, it's a very negative, it's very negative subject matter. And so I'm trying to understand it, but then also come back and let's get something positive out of it. Let's, after going through this terrible episode, maybe we can take something with us and our lives can improve as a result. We can be more effective in some way or another. And so I always try and do that. I always try and look at a case and not be too judgmental about it, not be too black and white about it. Try and see the humanity in the case, something that can reach all of us, and that ultimately our world improves as a result of this catastrophe. In other words, as a result of this horrible thing that apparently had to happen, maybe we can find a way that we at least don't repeat it, and at least in our own lives, in our own environment, in the people around us, maybe we can take something out of that horror, and it can lead to some moments, at least some days, perhaps even a new direction where we didn't need to make those mistakes in order to learn from them, but maybe we can sort of sit here right now and go, wow, I'm actually alive. These people died. This person wasted her whole life because she made the wrong decision, but I'm here right now. I'm alive. I can right now just make choices with my life. And maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do this. There's so many opportunities. I can come alive right now out of all this death and destruction. Maybe something incredible can come out of it. And that's my hope for you guys, that you know, through some of this, you recognize, for example, just that thing where you say the past is the best predictor of your future. If you recognize that, but you don't see it in a weird way, you see it and you also don't believe in fairy tales. You see things in a realistic way. It can really arm you to improve your life right now, today. You can make your life better today by avoiding all of these pitfalls, like believing in fairy tales, like trying to cheat the difficulties of life. When you embrace the difficulties of life, a really good example of that is someone who's running or training, maybe is riding a bicycle. Instead of trying to avoid the hills or curses every time he sees the hills, every time he's like, I'm so glad there's a hill because this is an opportunity I can get fitter and stronger. This is an opportunity where I'm going to be stressed and my body's going to take strain. I'm so glad this hill's here because now I can actually take it on and I'm going to be even stronger after this hill on the flat. In other words, don't try and avoid the pain. Don't try and escape the difficulty. Try and embrace it. And in that way, you're going to be far more effective in your own lives, just in ordinary things. And I think a thing all of us can just think about is sometimes exactly what I want to hear isn't exactly what I want to hear. And just think about that. When someone's telling you something maybe about yourself and you wanting to get defensive or you wanting to respond in a certain way, it's the opposite. You're not going to be defensive because it's exactly what you want to hear. Maybe you need to be a bit defensive about it and go like, why am I being told exactly what I want to hear? You're trying to sell me something. Am I being, and the same, think about that when you deal with somebody else. There is a thing like absolute honesty isn't recommended with emotional beings, but that's not quite what we're talking about. But if we can recognize that, especially with our leaders, are they telling you, do you think exactly what you want to hear? When horrible things are happening, are we being told things that, are we being told things as they are? You know, how much of our lives should be beliefs and how much should be based on evidence and critical thinking? I would definitely say more. We need more evidence and critical thinking. We need to be more the juries of our own lives and less the defendants or the prosecutors, right? Saying says, I like how you bring out the best. Thanks a lot for that. The schnauzer. Should we bring in the schnauzer before I skedaddle? Timmy, come. Let's bring in the schnauzer. The schnauzer is doing what I should be doing, which is sleeping. Timmy, come. There he comes. Come, boy. Come on. Here is the schnauzer. The schnauzer definitely needs a bath and a shave and a good long walk tomorrow. But anyway, Timmy says goodbye. I hope you guys have gotten some value out of this live. Good to see some of you again. Take care. Keep on sniffing and find the doggy version of yourself. Like one thing a dog doesn't need to do is be himself. They know, a dog knows how to access their doggy self, their dogginess. And that's the challenge we have as human beings, is to find not obviously a doggy, but the doggy self that is within us. In other words, who we authentically are, right? The part that you don't need to try to be, you just are that anyway. So anyway, that's my last word on that. Take care, guys. Hope you have a good rest of your night, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.